Eric. Joining us now with analysis of the election results is our political analyst, Paul Lisnek. Paul, we've just talked to you earlier this morning. You heard Eric mention that Kamala Harris did not do as well with African-American men. Talk about the other areas where Trump outperformed Kamala Harris.
Well, a couple of interesting things. Number one, Biden outperformed Harris in most of these demographics, and Trump outperformed himself in all previous elections with every group except educated college women. So, I'm sorry, educated white women. And so with African Americans, with Latinos, Trump made inroads in every one of those groups, outdoing everything he's done even in the past. So clearly the message resonated.
Which was economy and immigration? Is that it?
Those are the two primary things. Well, and you know, in the ads, we talked about this earlier, but the transgender issue was something he made a big deal about. A lot of people thought, well, that's not going to resonate, but it apparently does. The notion of, you know, men playing in women's sports resonated with a lot of people, but clearly the economy. The bottom line is that the White House had a, you know, basically a 75% we're on the wrong track rating. And when you're up against that, there's not a lot you can do as an incumbent. And she played as an incumbent, and he played her as an incumbent. It's very tough to hold on to a White House when people are so dissatisfied about the track of the country that it's on.
Let's talk about the House and Senate and how things are stacking up there. There's a chance that it could be a Republican-controlled House and Senate.
Well, the Senate's gone, so meaning the Republicans have taken the Senate already. And it's at 52 right now, and there's still a few seats up for grabs. We'll see what happens, but they have control. And what that means is that anybody that Trump wants to put in his cabinet, so we hear talk of RFK, of Robert Kennedy Jr., of Elon Musk, all these names, it's now a Republican Senate that makes those determinations, and they'll pretty much give him anything he wants, and also judicial appointments when it comes to Supreme Court. Most people predict, and I'll go along with this, that Justice Alito, Justice Thomas, now that Trump will be president, are likely to retire, and that means that Trump can appoint two others of like mind, but in their early 50s or so, who then give you a 5-block, very conservative majority for decades to come.
And I suspect the inner circle will look much different than his first time around, where you had a Tillerson and Kelly and these respected people. It seems like RFK is he is surrounding people that are loyal to him. What does that mean for Americans?
Well, it is exactly what he's doing. Trump himself has said that in his first term, he didn't know the lay of the land, so he brought in a lot of, like you said, Rex Tillerson. He brought in a lot of these people who understood the environment they needed to understand, and he counted on them. Now he gets the game. Now he understands what he wants to be done. So there's almost nobody who would say that he will appoint anything except loyalists who will be there for him and to do everything he asks them to do. That would include military leadership and other. Keep in mind, he's made a lot of promises going after political enemies, whatever. Will he do it? I don't know. But clearly he will be surrounded on immigration issues, deportation issues, by people who believe very strongly in his views. That's who will get appointed. And Senate, for anybody on the cabinet anyway, so he can avoid the Senate confirmation by just going with advisors. But when it comes to the cabinet, those have to be appointed, but this Senate will give it to him.
Let's talk about what the Democrats are saying to themselves this morning. Do they change the way they are taking things progressively? Do they look to a new leader? And who are those new leaders?
Well, I'm going to answer that by also answering the piece we didn't answer from the last question and putting them together, which is the House. Because right now the Democrats are saying, can we get the House? Because if Democrats can control the House, that's the check on a very Republican administration. Right now, Republicans have picked up 5 additional seats. That makes it tough for the Democrats. Democrats have picked up 2, and there's still several seats undecided. Several are in California, which is probably where this gets decided. So the Democrats' viewpoint, to go back to your question, Robin, if they get the House, then they have some leverage in this game. So things like extending tax cuts and those kind of things where you need the House to go along with it, much less likely to happen. But if the House stays in Republican hands, it's an unchecked agenda, and then the Democrats have to look essentially for 2 years from now and say, we've got to change the message, we've got to change the entire game.
Real quick, what's the deal on the criminal cases?
They will go away. He said he'll fire Jack Smith within minutes or seconds, he said, of taking office. So the federal cases will go away because the new attorney general will get rid of those cases. And with regard to the New York case, he's scheduled to be sentenced on November 26th. Technically, that judge can give him jail time, but it will get suspended until after he serves his presidency. The Georgia case also technically continues because it's a state, not a federal case. But everything will be suspended, if at all, until he's out of office.
All right, Paul Lisnek, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.